All right, so let's talk Indo-Pacific. I mean, it's kind of hard to ignore, right? It feels like every time you turn around, there's something major happening over there.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely a hotbed. Huge hub for global trade, strategic interests, you name it. Understanding how the pieces fit together there is, well, it's kind of essential if you want to get what's going on in the world today.
For sure, and that's what we're diving into today. Specifically, this new cooperation agreement between China and France. We've got some great material to unpack here, starting with an in-depth analysis of the agreement itself. We've also got a statement straight from China's Ministry of National Defense and some really insightful articles to help us understand the bigger picture.
Yeah, having a range of perspectives like that's always helpful. Let's just really get a feel for the nuances.
Exactly. So, what are we aiming for today? I think it boils down to really getting under the skin of this agreement, understanding what it means, why both China and France are so interested, and what kind of impact this might have on the Indo-Pacific as a whole. We want to make sure you walk away with a clear, solid understanding of this development.
Totally. So maybe a good place to start is with just how important the Indo-Pacific has become. It's a major, major player on the world stage these days. Just think about all the trade that flows through there, all the energy resources, It's no wonder it's become this massive arena for global strategy.
Absolutely. And when you look at China, well, their influence in the region is pretty hard to miss. I mean, you've got the Belt and Road Initiative, which is, a seriously ambitious undertaking, all about building infrastructure and connections throughout the region. And then, of course, there's their growing naval power. All pretty clear signs of their ambitions, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. But then you've also got France in the mix, which might surprise some people. They might not be the first country you think of when you think Indo-Pacific, but they have this long history in the region. They've got territories there, long-standing partnerships, and it seems like they're getting more and more focused on regional stability. They see it as a really important part of the global balance of power.
Totally. And speaking of that balance of power, this is where this military cooperation agreement really comes into play. It was officially signed on April 25th of this year, and China's Ministry of National Defense was pretty clear about what it means. They said it instituted a dialogue mechanism for inter-theater cooperation between the two countries' militaries. That sounds like a pretty big deal.
It is. And, it's really interesting that just before this agreement was announced, there was a meeting between Wang Shubin, who commands the PLA Southern Theater Command, which is the one responsible for the South China Sea, and Rear Admiral Geoffrey Dandin, who's the French commander of the Pacific Ocean and the French Polynesian maritime zones. The timing there makes you think, right, I mean, they were talking about the regional security situation. Chances are a lot of that conversation was about the South China Sea.
The plot thickens, which begs the question, why is France, a country without any direct territorial claims in the South China Sea, so focused on it? What's their angle?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? But even though they don't have land claims there, France has a lot at stake. If things get messy in the South China Sea, if there's conflict or instability, it could really disrupt their ability to communicate with their territories in the Pacific. It could cut off those lines of communication and transport, and that's a big problem for them.
Yeah, that makes total sense. They've got to keep those connections secure.
For sure. But it goes beyond that, too. I mean, think about how much of the world's trade passes through the South China Sea. It's a staggering amount. Back in 2023, something like 37% of the world's petroleum went through there. And every year, around 20% of all global commerce travels those waters. So any disruptions, any kind of conflict would have a massive ripple effect across the global economy, and France would definitely feel the pain.
Wow, yeah, those are some huge numbers. It really drives home how important that waterway is.
Totally. And to give you an idea of what it means for France specifically, back in 2016, they had something like 84 billion US dollars worth of goods going through the South China Sea. That's almost 8% of their total trade for that year. So keeping things stable and keeping those shipping routes open is crucial for their economy.
Okay, so France has a clear interest in what happens in the South China Sea. But here's where things get a little more complicated. Because at the same time they're signing this cooperation agreement with China, they're also busy cozying up to the Philippines. They're actually working on a defense agreement, which, if it goes through, could allow for joint military exercises on each other's soil. Pretty wild, huh?
It is. And on top of that, they just participated in those U.S.-Philippine Balikatan exercises, which happened just recently, late April and early May this year. And guess what? Some of those exercises took place in waters claimed by China. That's a pretty strong statement, wouldn't you say?
Definitely sends a message. And, we can't forget about all the tension we've seen recently between China and the Philippines. That whole water cannon incident in late April, the protests from the Philippines, it's all been pretty heated.
Right, and that's what makes this whole thing so fascinating. France is engaging with the Philippines in a way that probably doesn't sit too well with Beijing, and yet China still goes ahead and signs this cooperation agreement with them. It's almost like they're saying, okay, we see what you're doing over there, but we still want to work with you. It suggests that maybe they don't see France as a major threat, or at least not as much of a threat as some other countries.
Fascinating. It's like they're drawing a line in the sand. And, to add another layer to this whole situation, President Xi Jinping is actually planning a state visit to France in early May. They're really keeping that dialogue going.
Yeah, and it's interesting to think about this in the context of Macron's whole strategic autonomy thing, He's been pushing for Europe to be more independent, less reliant on other powers, especially the US. It's possible that China sees this as an opportunity. Maybe they think they can use France to counterbalance some of that US influence in the Indo-Pacific.
A real geopolitical dance, that's for sure. Okay, so we've laid out the landscape. Now let's dig a little deeper. What's really driving this agreement? What's in it for both China and France? Let's start with the economics. Why is this good for their wallets?
Well, for China, it all ties back to the Belt and Road Initiative. That's their big baby, and they're really serious about making it work. The Indo-Pacific is a critical part of that plan, a key corridor for trade and infrastructure development. Now, by partnering with France, a major player in the European economy, they get a few things. First, it gives the BRI more legitimacy, makes it look more attractive to other countries. It's like having a seal of approval from a respected player on the world stage.
Makes sense. And what about France? What are they getting out of this economically?
Well, for France, the Indo-Pacific represents a huge opportunity for economic growth. They've already got their overseas territories in the region, so they're invested in its success. But this agreement could open up even more doors. It could give French businesses better access to China's massive market, especially in areas like infrastructure, technology, and energy. It's all about staying competitive in a world where the economic landscape is constantly shifting.
So it's not just about ships passing through, it's about building real economic partnerships.
Absolutely. And both countries seem to agree that stability and sustainable development in the region are crucial for the global economy as a whole. By working together, they can tackle development challenges, promote innovation, and create more resilient supply chains. It's a win-win for everyone, at least in theory.
Sounds promising. But economics isn't everything. Let's talk strategy. What are the strategic goals behind this agreement? Let's start with China. What are they hoping to achieve?
China's got some big strategic ambitions in the Indo-Pacific. They want to be the dominant power in the region. That's no secret. They also want to counter U.S. influence and create a more multipolar world where they have more say in global affairs. Now, this agreement with France helps them in a few ways. It allows them to project an image of peaceful cooperation, of being a responsible player who's committed to working within international frameworks. That's a message that's going to resonate with a lot of smaller countries in the region who might be a little wary of China's growing power.
So it's a bit of a charm offensive, a way to build trust and influence.
Exactly. It's about showing they're willing to play nice and work with others. Now, for France, they've got their own strategic reasons for getting involved. Remember, they've got those territories in the Indian and Pacific Ocean, so they're pretty invested in the region's security.
They've got skin in the game for sure.
Absolutely. And by teaming up with China, they can leverage their military and economic might to address shared security concerns. It also strengthens their position within regional security frameworks like ASEAN, and it could even give them more leverage when it comes to dealing with the Quad. It's all about having a voice at the table and making sure their interests are considered.
So they're playing a bit of a balancing act, trying to maintain good relationships with everyone.
That's the game, isn't it? But it's also about something bigger. It's about the future of global governance. Both China and France are big believers in multilateralism, in working through international institutions to solve problems. By working together, they can offer an alternative to the more Western-dominated approaches, and they can push for a more balanced and inclusive global system.
It's like they're saying, hey, there's another way to do things, and we're here to show you what it looks like.
Exactly. And of course, we can't forget about the soft power angle. Both countries stand to gain in terms of their global image and diplomatic clout. For China, partnering with a major EU member like France is a big win. It makes them look more cooperative and engaged on the world stage. And for France, aligning with a global powerhouse like China amplifies their voice and gives them more influence on issues like technology, sustainable development, and climate change. It's a win-win in terms of international prestige.
So they're both getting something out of this, diplomatically speaking. But let's be honest, there's always a bit of a chess game going on in these situations. How does this agreement fit into the broader diplomatic strategies of both countries?
Good question. For China, it's definitely part of their strategy to counter U.S. influence and avoid being isolated on the world stage. By strengthening ties with countries like France, they're showing that they have friends in high places and they're not going to be pushed around by the U.S. or anyone else. It's a way to build a broader base of international support and make it harder for others to form alliances against them.
So it's a way to hedge their bets, diplomatically speaking.
Exactly. Now, France, they're in a bit of a tricky position. They're part of NATO, so they're closely allied with the U.S. But they also want to maintain their own independence and be able to engage with other major powers like China. This agreement gives them a little more wiggle room, a bit more flexibility in how they navigate the global landscape. It also positions them as a potential mediator, someone who can bridge the gap between different blocs and help to find common ground.
So they're trying to walk a tightrope, but in a way that benefits them strategically.
That's a good way to put it. And ultimately, it all ties back to their vision of a multipolar world order. They want a world where different perspectives are valued, where power is more evenly distributed, and where they can play a significant role in shaping global affairs.
It's like they're saying, we're not just going to follow someone else's lead, we're going to chart our own course.
Exactly. They want a seat at the table, and they're willing to work with different partners to achieve that.
So it's clear that China and France are both getting something out of this agreement. But what about the rest of the Indo-Pacific? What kind of impact might this have on the region as a whole?
Well, it's definitely going to shake things up a bit. It adds a whole new layer of complexity to the already intricate dynamics of the Indo-Pacific. For China, it's a strategic win. It boosts their diplomatic clout and makes it harder for other countries to gang up on them. It also helps to paint them as a cooperative and responsible player, which can be pretty persuasive to smaller nations in the region.
So it's a power move, but with a soft touch.
That's a good way to put it. And for France, it strengthens their position as a major player in the region. It gives them more influence in both security and economic matters, and it allows them to play a more active role in shaping the regional order.
So they're not just along for the ride. They're becoming a real force to be reckoned with.
Exactly. They're stepping up their game. And, this is going to have an impact on the other big players in the region, too. The U.S., Japan, Australia, India, they're all going to be watching this very closely. They might have to rethink their own strategies and start taking a more inclusive approach, one that recognizes the growing influence of China and the changing dynamics of the region.
So it could be a wake-up call for them.
It very well could be. And for the countries of Southeast Asia, this agreement could be a game changer. They're often caught in the middle between the big powers, trying to navigate a complex web of relationships. But this agreement could give them more options. It could allow them to diversify their partnerships, hedge their bets, and play a more active role in shaping their own destinies.
So it's a chance for them to gain some leverage, to play the field a bit more.
Exactly. And in the long run, this could lead to a more balanced and multipolar Indo-Pacific where no single power dominates and where cooperation is the name of the game.
It's a whole new game, that's for sure. Now, let's zoom out a bit. How does this agreement fit into the long-term strategic visions of China and France in the Indo-Pacific? What are their ultimate goals?
Well, for China, it's all about becoming a global superpower. They want to secure their economic interests, build strong relationships with other countries, and create a world where they have a say in how things are run. This agreement is just one piece of that puzzle, but it's a significant one. It shows that they're willing to work with different partners to achieve their goals, and it helps to legitimize their vision of a multipolar world.
So it's a step towards a new world order, one where China plays a leading role.
That's certainly their ambition. And for France, it's about maintaining their influence on the world stage. They want to be a major player in global affairs, and they see the Indo-Pacific as a key arena for that. They want to protect their interests, strengthen their relationships, and help to shape the future of the region. This agreement allows them to do all of that while also promoting their vision of a more multipolar world.
So it's a win-win for them, strategically speaking.
Absolutely. They're both playing the long game, and this agreement gives them a leg up.
It's a fascinating situation, that's for sure. So much going on, so many different angles to consider.
Definitely keeps things interesting.
So to wrap it all up, this cooperation agreement between China and France is a pretty big deal. It's driven by a complex mix of economic, strategic, and diplomatic interests, and it has the potential to reshape the entire Indo-Pacific region. It's a great example of how the global landscape is shifting, becoming more complex and multipolar.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
And it leaves us with some really interesting questions to ponder. Like, how will this impact the relationships between other major players in the region? Will it lead to more cooperation, or will it just make things even more competitive? And what does it mean for the future of alliances in the Indo-Pacific? Lots to think about, that's for sure. But hey, that's what makes this stuff so fascinating, right? It's a never-ending puzzle, and we're all trying to figure out how the pieces fit together.
You said it.
And that's all we have time for today. But we hope this deep dive has given you a better understanding of this important development and its implications for the Indo-Pacific and beyond.
Absolutely. And be sure to join us next time for another deep dive into the world of global affairs.
Until then, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep those brains buzzing.
See you next time.